Welcome to Advocacy Toolkit number 3, Planning a Meeting with Your Legislator. In this toolkit, we're going to cover the skills you need to get the most out of your meetings with your legislator and other legislative offices. The framework we will be using for this toolkit is how to make an impact, and we'll go through what that means for each section. Identify who to meet with, make an appointment, prepare and practice, arrive on time, come dressed appropriately, and finally talk, but also listen. So, up first, identify who you want to meet with. This seems like an obvious point, but it is not necessarily that simple. Each of us have several different legislators that represent us at different levels of government, from the federal government all the way down to your local city council. However, the tools on this slide can help you quickly identify who your legislator is and how to reach them. In addition, every state government has a website with a directory of all of its members, including their contact information. This is a screenshot from one of those pages. George Barker is my legislator from Virginia, but every legislator website will have similar information. You'll find their contact information, a list of committees they work on, who they represent, and a few biographical details. So once you have identified who it is you want to meet with, it's important to make an appointment. Making an appointment is critical as opposed to just dropping by, because it ensures you will have your legislator's undivided attention. The best way to make an appointment is to contact the office via phone or email. Make sure they know who you are, for example, if you're representing an organization. Give them advance notice and be flexible about the exact day and time. And finally, it's okay to meet with their staff if you can't meet directly with the legislator. Staff members have enormous power, and if the staff isn't on your side, it's likely the legislator won't support a given issue anyway. This is an example of an email to request an appointment. It is important that your subject clearly identifies that this is a meeting request. Make sure you specify who you are. You don't want to include too much information about your issue in the email itself. That's what the meeting is for. But you do want to make sure that you provide them with a general idea of what you want to talk about. Legislators get a lot of these requests, so this way they will know exactly what to do with yours. They will likely ask for more information if they need it. So now you have your meeting time set. What are you going to say? There are other toolkits that address what types of issues and bills may be of interest to you. Once you've identified what you want to talk about, narrow down your most important points. If you're making a specific request, such as to invite your legislator to an event, make sure to have the exact details ready. It may help to practice out loud with a friend. And finally, if you are meeting as part of a group, make sure to figure out who will be speaking and when. So you've set your meeting. You know what you're going to talk about. Now it's showtime. Make sure you arrive on time. Again, this may seem obvious, but it's easier said than done. Legislative offices are busy places and can be difficult to navigate. Plan to arrive early. If you're running late, make sure to let the office know immediately. Keep in mind that parking may be limited, and in some cases you may need to send advance notice to get directions to handicap accessible entrances and parking. There will always be security checks, often with lines. The more metal you are wearing, such as a belt or jewelry, will slow you down. If you are meeting with a group, make sure to designate a meeting spot that everyone can identify. Be prepared for last-minute delays. This always happens. And finally, keep in mind that the visitor entrances to some buildings are not always super easy to find. Some entrances are closed depending on the time of the year. Some are only for staff or employees. This is a map of the Virginia State Capitol. You can see where the main Capitol building is, but the meetings actually take place in the legislative office building across the street. Most legislative offices have this kind of setup, so make sure to check it out ahead of time. One more obvious note worth mentioning: make sure to dress appropriately. You want to be taken seriously, so it is recommended that you always dress in business attire. This means a pressed suit or slacks and a jacket. There's no dress code, but it's important to make a good impression. All right, so you've made an appointment, you've planned your discussion points, you've arrived on time, and now you're in the meeting. What now? Talk, but also listen. This is your meeting. You can drive the conversation and talk about what you're planning to discuss. It's helpful to think about specific questions that can be used to engage the legislator about your issues. Things can tend to get off topic. These people schmooze for a living. So do your best to keep things on track. Don't be afraid to steer the conversation back if it goes off the rails. If you are asked a question and you don't know the answer, don't try to fake it. Just be honest. This can actually be a good reason to follow up with the office afterwards. And finally, at the end of the meeting, make sure to recap the important points. For example, you asked for this information, which I will send you next week. Most people who meet with legislators often like to use a general structure in meetings that may be helpful to you. First, share your specific experience or expertise. This is essentially why they should listen to you. Second, remind them why you are there and provide background information. And third, make an actionable request. Even if you ignore the other 2 points, this is the most important. They won't necessarily ask you what you want them to do or how they can help. They get a lot of these meetings, and they'll just say it was great meeting with you and thanks for coming. So it is extremely important that you make sure to be specific about what you want them to do. All right, you've had a great meeting. Now what? Make sure to follow up and remind them of who you are and what was discussed. Be professional, even if there was a disagreement. Thank them, restate your issue, and highlight what was discussed and what the next steps are. And make sure to respond to any unanswered questions. It's also important to regroup with anyone who joined you in the meeting or would be interested to know how it went. This is an example of a follow-up email. Feel free to use it as a template. Email is fine. Some people like to go the extra mile and send in a handwritten letter. This is great, but keep in mind that legislators filter and screen all of their mail for security purposes. It may take a while for a handwritten note to arrive. Also, in your meeting, you likely met new staff. An email response is a great way to bring these people into the conversation again. A few final thoughts. Your legislators and their staff want to have an ongoing relationship with you. Feel free to keep them in the loop about your activities. Also, keep an eye out for events that they may be hosting that you can attend, such as a meet and greet. This is a great way to remind them of who you are and address the issues you want their support for. Finally, make sure to check out other toolkits that may be of help to you, developing leave behind materials, and how Rare Action Network can help you. Thank you for viewing this toolkit. For more information, please visit rareaction.org and rarediseases.org.